at, changing really the conversation about the gifts that our children are bringing. And so one of the things we really have to look at is, first of all, is access. Do we have access to the high quality programming across every one of our neighborhoods, especially in our neighborhoods where we have the highest poverty rates, which tend to be also our neighborhoods where our children of color are? And how do we make sure that access exists so that they don't have to leave their neighborhood? They don't have to, be trying to get into one of our selective enrollment schools to get access to that programming, including, by the way, extracurriculars. One of the things that I did in my former district, we invested heavily in the fine arts. We invested heavily in ROTC and athletic programs. And I'll tell
I
you,
think that's good.
To bring the pride of our children, because
I think
when
that
a
stuff
child
is
lives in
good.
poverty,
I have no issue with that.
you always start behind academically. Why? Because, for example, my parents had a second grade education. They didn't know what they didn't know. And so my vocabulary wasn't as strong as if I would have grown up in a middle class family, right? I wouldn't have the same access and exposure that I would have had in a middle class family. So for us, that's always the challenge. But I'll tell you, when we bring access to our families, to our children, to that programming, their pride comes out. Their pride. And I'll tell you, the arts.
All right, this guy to me, the CEO guy, the guy in the dark suit, not the other guy. Look at the other guy's facial expression. Okay, this guy to me is not coming across as a true believer. He's coming across as a useful idiot, and that's actually preferable. It's better to be a useful idiot than a true believer. I believe that he's coming across as someone who I don't think this guy understands what's going on, is what I'm trying to say. I don't think he is really bought into fully this ideology. He probably agrees with some of it just because he thinks it's what he needs to do to be a good person. But the reason I say that is that he's focusing on, he doesn't mind the family. He's thinking about it from his perspective of growing up in an impoverished household that lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with a lot of kids, and he's thinking how do I help these families? How do I help the families? Anytime you hear people, and this is, I need to pay attention to see if this proves out to be true, but I think it's true so far. In any of these presentations that we watch, when they talk about the family and having the family be involved and getting the family to be parts of kids' lives and thinking about the family, they're usually not true believers, because the true believers want to separate the children from the family. Okay? Exactly, Gremlin. Basically, he's been lied to. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so I have a little bit more sympathy. He's not, to me, coming across as uber woke. He's not to me, but look at the look on that other guy's face. He's like, that guy is a true believer. I'm gonna bet you.
Extracurriculars, those programs do that.
Leader of
He's
Chicago
definitely
Public
a useful
Schools.
idiot. And it is really important for us to be nuanced about this, because one of the things that I absolutely cannot stand about the right is that they blow everything up and about everything like they're woke leftists. Sometimes there are causes to do that, and sometimes there are not. And I'm not suggesting that there's not shady shit going on in the Chicago public schools, because we know for a fact there is. We've seen their equity manual. We've seen their curriculum. So we know that there is stuff going on. But what I'm gathering from this, and there's a Q&A apparently in the back half of this, so maybe we'll learn a little bit more about it. What I suspect is happening is this guy is in charge of everything, but he has people who work for him. And so I don't mind this guy, like the CEO dude. I don't mind him at all. I think that he actually sounds pretty competent and capable, if I'm honest about it. But I suspect that the people underneath him are true believers. So I don't think that this guy is a true believer, and that's good. But that doesn't mean there's not shady stuff going on, but we do need to be nuanced about this, because if we just go around reeing over everyone who's saying they're doing something with equity without really understanding what they mean by equity and what they're actually doing, and then kind of doing a check on ourselves to say, is this good? Is this going to help? Is this bad? Is this not going to help? We need to triage these things, essentially. And I don't think it benefits us at all to label every single person as being awful when some of them probably really do care and really do want to do a good job. And I think that if we about everything, then we're going to then no one is going to pay attention to it. It's going to lose its meaning essentially. When I go out there and I say this is a problem, I want people to know that is a real problem. I want people to know that I don't just do that over everything. I look at a lot of stuff, and sometimes it's a problem, and sometimes it is not a problem. And I'm not going to go and make a big deal fuss over things that I think are, pretty okay. Exactly, Gremlin. If we re over everything, we will become the thing we're fighting. By the way, that is what the right has done to the word groomer. The word groomer, absolutely meaningless. It is meaningless. They throw it around as an insult to anyone they disagree with all the time. The right has done this to in the way that the left did this to the word racist. They threw around racist as an insult for anyone that disagreed with them. The right has done that with groomer, and I think it's really dangerous to do that because it has lost all of its meaning, and they have pissed a lot of people off. They've pissed a lot of people off.
We have to hold space for optimism and good intention and wrestle with those ideas. And we have to make sure that, I think the one thing I've also learned is that I wish we would have done more listening to young people throughout the process. And that is something, I talk with other equity officers around the country all the time. And we're always talking about like focus groups, or what are the ways in which we capture young people's voice so that they have their voices centered in the conversation, that can help us all as adults.
Where does the idea of centering the voice of young people in the conversation come from? Pop quiz in the chat. Where does the idea of centering the voices of young people in the conversation come from? We talked about it yesterday. I'm pretty sure we talked about it the day before as well. I know there's a delay. I will use my teacher waiting mode. Where does the idea of centering the voices of young people in the conversation come from? Any guesses? I know what book we're reading for book club after the Communist Manifesto. It does come from socialism. It come from those specifically. I know you guys know this. I know what book we're reading. Yes! Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And we do know that Pedagogy of the Oppressed is fully integrated into the Chicago public schools. How do we know that? Because they told us that in the socialism presentation on Monday. Pedagogy of the Oppressed. That's socialism. See, doesn't it sound so innocent? And this is why we really need to teach people. This is why we need to teach people where what these are. Like, when he says we need to center the voices of young people in the conversation, that sounds innocent, and that sounds like something that might not be like the worst idea in the world that's ever been done. But when we think about where it comes from, which again, this was said 2 days ago in that socialism presentation that we watched, where they literally named Pedagogy of the Oppressed. That's where the idea comes from. And we know they're integrating Pedagogy of the Oppressed into their curriculum. Well done, guys.
Do better at figuring out how do we do this in their best interest. I think I'm holding that sort of optimism around elevating the voice of young people.
Yeah, and for me to build on that, it really is, how do we get more parents to the table?
Oh!
I think for me, we could have our differences with our different stakeholders, and that's okay.
This is the very definition of true believers. This guy and this woman are true believers versus the useful idiot. And again, I don't say that as an insult. I think it's preferable to be a useful idiot, because he was like, how do we center the voice of young people in the conversation? And then this guy came back with, how do we get parents involved? It's kind of like a little bicker that they're having right in front of us, but they're doing it in a really nice way. They don't agree on this. but they're disagreeing very politely, and they're pretending that they agree. They don't agree. They might not even know that they don't agree with each other. But this guy was like centering the voices of young people in the conversation. I'm going to recite my Marxism. And this guy's like, how do we get parents involved though? That is very literally the distinction between equity and equality.
Okay, so we welcome, constructive criticism. We always have, places to improve on. But I think what really hurt me the most was just the fact that, parents were held hostage in the middle and never felt like they really had a voice. And so that's something that I'm really taking to heart. I've only been here 3 months, but I still feel that we need
I
to
should
find
clip that,
ways
Reagan. You're
for
right.
parents to feel that they're part of the conversation because frankly, these are their children, right? They should have a say so on how they're feeling. With over 100,000 children being vaccinated, you have, one area, one set of parents that, feel a certain way. Another set of parents, frankly, that are very anxious and for different reasons still have a lot of questions about vaccines and about, COVID in general. And so, I think as we have to be the ones that bring people together and to Maurice's point, have a sense of optimism about how do we move forward. And I, I'm just, like I said, I just felt so sad for so many of our families that were sort of caught in the middle.
Thank you both for that. As you think about moving forward, one of the questions that came through was really about trauma and about the social emotional challenges that not just students face, but that teachers are facing, what teachers are actually seeing in their classrooms every single day. And so, the idea is that obviously teachers and adults and kids have a lot happening in the course of normal business, but we're in the midst of COVID. So as you think about this, what is the district can do? Like, how do we actually support our students? How do we support our teachers, especially those most impacted by trauma?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Pedro, you want to?
Yeah, you go ahead, Maurice. Mm-hmm.
I like Pedro.
I think there are a
I
couple
get good vibes
of
from Pedro.
things. One, we do have a lot of teachers within the district who are exceptional, teachers and principals, who are exceptional at supporting young people. And to Pedro's point earlier, like, how do we learn from them? Because sometimes I think like we need to hire more people, and we need to sort of bring people in. And the larger question is around what is the expertise that's already.
And by the way, guys, I just want to explain this really quick for people who don't understand what I'm doing. So one of the things that I have spent a lot of time doing as an organizational psychologist is like observing meetings and observing team interactions and facilitating workshops in which I observed the interpersonal communication and the interactions and how people interpreted different information and the reasons why they said things. I've observed a lot of this in organizations. And so when I'm saying that they just had a little bicker and that they might not even realize it, this is something that I've just seen over and over and over and over again. These are patterns that show up in social systems. And so for people who think that I might just be inventing this or creating this, no. All this comes from somewhere. And it comes from observing human beings in social systems for a decade. I've been an organizational psychologist for a decade. Did a lot of this work. And so I want people to know that this is actually like, this is something I do instinctually at this point, because anytime that I facilitated like team workshops, team building exercises, things like that, it's something that I do instinctually at this point. I don't even think about it. And so I just want people to know that it does come from somewhere. I'm not just pulling it out of my ass. And there is there is backing to all of this. But when I'm making observations about their behaviors and their interactions, that's the framework that I'm working from.
In schools, and how do we learn it?
I want
to ask for feedback in the chat, because many of you have watched many of these videos with me. Do you all notice a difference between just I don't know how to quantify this. Do you notice a difference between people who are the true believers and the useful idiots? The best way I can quantify it is that the people who are true believers, to me, their energy feels cold. It feels restricted. It feels almost like cult-like. Whereas the people who are the useful idiots, I generally find them to be a lot warmer. I find them to be more pleasant. I obviously find their ideas to be better, because they're not totally bought into this. They're kind of going along with this stuff because it's like, it's what they need to do to be a good person. Yeah, Pedro means well. He's like a moderate progressive. He means well. He also does not understand from the same 40K view as the rest of us. It's a bit unclear to me. I don't necessarily agree with, I don't disagree with that. Like, I would actually like to talk to Pedro and find out what his understanding of this is. I don't think that will ever happen, but I would like to do that. Savritz says the boundaries of perception have become barriers. I definitely agree with that, Savritz. But I do feel like there is just a different vibe, for lack of a better term, between the true believers, like this dude is and she is, and the useful idiots, which is what Pedro is. Like, this is we found the same thing with like the Rochester School District, right? Where I said from the very beginning of watching of doing the investigation, I was like, I don't dislike the woman in charge of equity in the Chicago School District. I was like, she's like a math professor, she understands logic, she seems like a reasonable person. Like, there was a different vibe about her than the true believers. And so, like, that's something I want to really think about a little bit more. And if you guys have thoughts on that, I would love to hear them. Yeah, well, Sin, you're probably right. I think Pedro will either be recruited or thrown out. I mean, that's usually the way, right? Like, they're going to let Pedro go and do his thing for as long as he leaves them alone to do their thing. If Pedro just stays out of their way and kind of does his thing at the highest level, but leaves them alone to do whatever they want to do, Pedro's going to be just fine. The minute that Pedro starts meddling or asking too many questions or asking the wrong questions, then he's going to find himself not employed in that job anymore. One way or another, they're going to work to get him out. And I hope that doesn't happen. Pedro genuinely seems like a nice guy that's trying to do the right thing. I don't have any bad feelings towards him at all.
Pivot, and this question actually came in prior, but I think it's really important that we touch on this. The question is about our students who are in Chicago public schools who are experiencing homelessness, and particularly some of our African American students. You know, research has shown that about 26% of Black students in CPS will experience homelessness.
Hang on. She's about to ask a really woke question. I definitely want to hear it. But Sin says he's already saying the wrong things, though. But Sin, the thing of it is they haven't picked up on it yet. We know that Pedro is saying the wrong things because we're on the outside looking in, and I'm pointing out the wrong things that Pedro's saying that signify him as a useful idiot rather than a true believer. So yes, we know that he's asking the wrong questions, but he hasn't really he has not pushed back on their agenda. What Pedro did was more of like a yes and. Okay. Like, if I think someone is wrong, I'm going to go, no, you are wrong. And this is why you are wrong. And this is what you need to fix to be wrong. Okay. If Pedro came in and said, no, we're not doing this Paulo Freire bullshit. We are not doing pedagogy of the oppressed. We are removing that from the curriculum because it is not good. It is Marxism. And we're not doing that in my school district. If Pedro came in and did that, then he would lose his job in like a day and a half. I promise you. He would not have any tenure there at all. But what Pedro's doing is saying, yes, you can do your Paulo Freire bullshit, and I don't mind it. But let's also involve parents, and let's also get the family involved. He's not doing a no. He's doing a yes and. And that's what you need to do when you're playing the political game. I bet you Pedro knows that he's playing a political game. You don't get to be a person at his level, like the CEO of the Chicago Public Schools. You don't get to be at his level if you don't know how to play this game. But the minute he comes hard at them is the minute that his career is going to be over there.
Homelessness during their school. This next question actually came from one of our teachers. It was live in the chat a few minutes ago, and it says, understanding that the history of the Chicago Teachers Union and Chicago Public Schools has been contentious even before the official inception of the Teachers Union. What do you think you can do to break the culture and institutionalization of the adversarial relations between the two. It's so important that they're able to work together.
Yes, how can you work
So
better
I'll
with the
tell you,
teachers
you know,
unions? Great
Jesse Sharkey
question.
and I, we've been
We
in
don't like the
active
teachers unions.
conversations, you know, almost since I started. In fact, Maurice and
Yeah,
I had dinner
captured.
with the CTU leadership. I think it was in my first week, Maurice, right? That, you know, we met with them. And so I think it starts first by, you know, having honest conversations. And we had this conversation that, you know, there's some trust issues that go back well beyond a decade.
Oh my
And
God,
so we
I love
called
this
that
guy
out.
so much.
And so, for example, Jesse and I have committed, you know, that we're going to, especially, you know, after this work stoppage, that we're going to find a way to move forward, that we're going to find a way to work together. I believe, you know, I respect the union that, again, they're
He hates the teachers unions. I'm telling you right now, this guy does not like the teachers unions at all in any way. That's my opinion. I could be wrong, but like when he leads with, we need to have honest conversations and there have been trust issues, you need to read between the lines of like of what he's really saying. When because if he liked the teachers unions, his answer would have been much more enthusiastic about working with the teachers unions, but he led with, we need to have honest conversations. He doesn't like the teachers unions. He's going to work with them. Don't get me wrong. He knows where his bread is buttered. But he is not I like this guy. I started off not liking this guy. I have come around to Pedro. I'm a fan of Pedro. Pedro may be Chicago's last hope. Does anyone know if Pedro is still employed with the city of Chicago? I cross my fingers and pray that he still actually is. Yes, Pedro is playing the game. That's exactly right. So one of the things we need to listen to when we're watching for things like this is you need to not only listen for what they're saying, you need to listen for what they're not saying. When he chose to lead on a question with the teachers unions about like, you know, how would you work with the teachers unions or whatever, and he said we need to have honest conversations and like trust has been like a little broken in the past, like he could have led with something way more positive and complimentary of the teachers unions. He didn't have to lead with that. And so this is how you can start to suss out his true feelings, because Pedro is a politician. He's not like literally, but he knows how to play office politics. And so he is going to say things in the most nice, innocuous, especially since he's on camera. He is not going to say anything that could get him in trouble. So we always have to assume that if he is not saying something glowing and he's saying things like we need to have honest conversations, there's some tension there that he's trying to smooth over. I don't think he's a fan. I really want to press the people if their equity plan will conform to federal law, especially Title VII and the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. That is a great question, AD. And I suspect if we asked them, they would say, yes, it does, even though that might not be the truth. I think Pedro probably would perceive it to be the truth. I don't think he really understands this stuff, though. Yes, we need to have an honest conversation is a politician's answer. That's exactly right. Well, no, it's the politician's answer when he doesn't want to say something negative. If he had something positive to say, he would have said it. It's the politician's answer when he doesn't want to be overtly negative.
role is to protect its members, to protect, frankly, unions have made our country better overall. I mean, it's the reason why, working conditions are so much better than they were, decades ago, is because of unions. And we should recognize that. The challenge is,
Here we go.
how do we make sure that there is on both sides a trust level to be able to find solutions that don't create so much drama and so much challenges for our families.
He literally just said that the teachers union creates too much drama for families. He said it in a really nice way, but our challenge is to work together to find solutions where we're not creating drama for families. Do you think he's saying that he's creating drama for families? No, he's saying that the teachers unions are creating dramas for families. But he has said it in a way where what, like, he can go, if he gets called out on that, if like someone in the teachers union watches my analysis of this and they're like, that asshole said we created drama in the families, what he can then do is go to them and say, no, I was talking about us. I wasn't talking about you. He's given himself plausible deniability to be able to retract or modify the statement later. Are you guys seeing this? I want to teach you guys how to analyze interactions like this so that if you don't know how to like read what's going on, you can learn how to do it so that when we watch these videos like this, we have so much more access to more information than just what is coming out of their mouth. There's so much more going on in these interactions. And the more you guys can understand how to interpret them, and quite frankly, you can use this like if you're in a school board meeting in like your town and you're looking at interactions among the school board members, there's so much you can tell without them specifically saying the words.
And so that's a challenge that, that I will put to myself and to our team. And frankly, I'll put to our partners, right? We have to find ways to solve solutions without holding our families hostage. And that's something that, again, we all have to own. It isn't one-sided. We all have to own that. My commitment is that, I'm going to make sure that, that we listen and that when we hear concerns that employees have, that we really act timely. And all I ask again is let's make sure we do that without frankly creating situations that could harm our children, because that's the unintended consequence. It's like when two parents are in a fight and they're in a divorce, who really suffers at the end? It's the children, right? That are caught in the middle because it's their parents. They can't separate them. They both, and so I hate,
He just admitted that the school district is in a fight with the teachers union. Which is true, by the way. Which is true. Like the Chicago Teachers Union didn't they go on strike? I'm pretty sure they did, like around this time. So he's kind of like, I'm pretty sure it was around the time when this was filmed. I could be wrong about that. Someone fact check me. But like, he just said like, we're mom and dad and we're fighting and we're bickering and it's the kids that are suffering for it. I love this so much. This is so revealing of how he truly feels.
And it's probably not a great analogy. Probably Maurice has a better analogy, but that's the best I can come up with.
No,
Pedro, the hero we need.
I say this thing to my
final.
Yeah. I am always optimistic about the future for the city of Chicago and Chicago public schools. I think being Black, gay, queer, there is no other way but to be optimistic. I can't stay in pain or anger a very long time.
Wait, he's Black, gay, and queer?
Solve big problems. And so
good.
I think my last word before
Definitely
Pedro
a true believer.
is whenever you feel like you want to have a hand in the solution, please put your hand in the stack of hands. And also when there are concerns, raise them up. Pedro listens a lot. I'll give you that nod, and is always asking for different ways to solve things. And so I think there's centering possibility here for all students across the city. And so just welcoming, past your first 100 days in Chicago Beyond as partners, I think if we can continue to bring more folks to the center of the work, we can do great work together.
Okay,
No,
what he just did, I want to point this out. Because again, he's the true believer. She's a true believer. He is brand new on the job. This guy is brand effing new when this was recorded. Like, what did they say? Like 8 days into the job or something like that? He was brand effing new. So what this guy just did is they've had some bickering throughout this. Not really, not overtly, but they've had some bickering. So what he just said is, people that like me, give Pedro a chance. He listens. We like that he listens. They're going to try to get him. I hope they haven't. But they're going to try to, if they have not been able to already, convert him to be a true believer. And he was the black guy, the black, gay, and queer guy, was basically sending a message to like staff that report up to him, to people who have worked with him, people who have liked him, that like there was a little bit of tension between the two of them, but he's doing the politician thing, which is, let's welcome him, talk to him. He listens. He's playing the game. And I want everyone to be able to identify that. I am curious about where Pedro is at now. I wish there was a follow-up. Maybe we'll look for one.
Absolutely, Maurice. And I'll just say this, in the next 2 to 3 months, we're going to be sharing with you just some big ideas, some big plans, everything from investing in preschool to investing in multiple programs, investing in our comprehensive high schools, creating more resources for our schools to serve our families.
Placebo racism, it's illusionary.
Making key investments in areas where there's our first learners or English language learners. And what I would suggest is, again, know that you have a seat at the table. Know that you're part of this, because I only know how to do this work one way. And in terms of getting success, is that we have to have ownership. And this is our city. This is our community. I've grown up here. I went to school.
Did you hear, like, this guy was like, we basically telling them that they all need to do the work, and Pedro came back with, I only know one way to do the work, and that's to get results. Oh my God. I love how much these two covert can't stand each other in this talk. I fucking love it. I would absolutely kill to be a fly on the wall of their meetings. I can't even tell you.